Hello, and welcome to another episode of Otaku in Training. I am your host, LB. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, CT.
Evening.
And joining us again is our trainee, Bama.
Hi, everybody.
So for this month, normally CT and I discuss which series we are going to show to our trainee, and we come to a consensus. But in this case, I kind of took the lead and decided to force my choice onto everybody. And that would be we decided to break the mold a little bit. Normally, we only do 12 episode series, but this time I wanted to see how things would go if we did the first half of a series and then decided where to go from there. And in that case, we are going to be talking about the first 12 episodes of Ancient Magus Bride. So, Ancient Magus Bride is only a couple of years old. I believe it came out in 17, I want to say, maybe 19.
17.
17? Okay, cool. So, yeah.
Technically, there were OVAs in 16 and 17. We didn't
Okay,
start with
cool.
those.
Okay, cool. So, alright, but we're talking about the main TV series for this one, and like I said, we're just discussing the first 12 episodes. We may come back around and discuss the second half of the series at some point, but we haven't fully committed to that yet. But regardless, the first 12 episodes seemed like a good breaking in point for something a little bit longer. So we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna jump right into things. Ancient Magus Bride, Bama. You and I watched the first few episodes of this together because I happened to be visiting you when I was pushing for so hard for this. So I'm kind of curious, before we even started watching the series, based on what I had told you, did you have any reservations about this one? Because I did warn you that this series was going to get pretty dark at times.
You did. And to be honest, I was worried that it was going to be a lot worse than it was. This was well within my comfort zone. I'm at very least I'm looking back on it going, yeah, that was really cool and a fun ride. I don't know how much worse it's going to get after episode 12, but yeah, up until then, it was really neat, and I enjoyed it quite a bit, actually.
Well, that comes across as a little surprising because, of course, fairly early on we do get bloody cat murder. So that would have been one of my things that I'm like, maybe that'll be a cutoff point. I don't know if you got there while you were watching together or not, and that helped. Or I'm not quite sure what your particular level of discomfort with dark themes and certain kind of violence, or uh, did did the fact that this is kind of creepy, fey strangeness assist with it, rather than just human on human, straightforward murder face?
That's probably a very accurate description of why I thought it was okay. The creepy cat murder was pretty extreme, and I do remember burying my face on my not wife's arm and saying, "Tell me when it's over." um, and she's more of a cat person than I am, so in retrospect, that was actually kind of rude. Uh, if you're listening, sorry, baby.
So getting into the actual series itself, like I said, I warned you ahead of time that it was gonna get dark. But and I also gave you the option to tap out at any point. Uh, Early on, were there any moments that made you think about tapping out, or was it all within your realm of acceptance that you never felt the need to exercise that option or felt tempted to do so.
I don't think I was ever tempted to tap out. In general, animation itself, I think that's an extra layer of unreality to really remind me that this is not real, and that frees me up to enjoy it a little bit better. If this had been a live action series with the cat murders, I could not have handled it.
Hmm.
Just straight up letting you know now.
Yeah, no worries.
Wow.
Yeah.
But there are so many live action cat murder series that we want to explore. So
The
it's
last
really
time I
a modern
tapped
genre.
out of a media thing, it was a movie. I can't remember what the movie was, but we decided to watch it as a family, and the first thing they do is the good guys rush in and try to save a bunch of school kids from the bad guys who are running a big drug ring, and they get all the little kids loaded up into a helicopter, and at the last minute the bad guys blow up the helicopter. And I said, nope, if you're killing a busload of kids before the credits open, I am not going to watch the rest of this movie.
I'm
And
pretty sure
that's
I
the
know
last
what
time.
movie you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't. I just said, you two enjoy it, and if you want
Hmm.
ice cream later, I'll fix ice cream, but I am going to go plan D&D now. And thus I did.
Definitely sounds like an ice cream and popcorn sort of movie.
Oh yeah, and I don't have a problem with people who enjoy action flicks. It's just not my thing. It's like, yeah, there are plenty of ways to make a bad guy irredeemable before killing a busload of kids before the credits fully open. Just come on, dude. That's not okay.
So edgy.
So yeah, compared to that, the insane cat murders were creepy and weird and wrong, but not. It was something I could stomach in small doses. If there was something like that in every episode, then that would not be for me.
And definitely a different kind of darkness in here. The fact that this is so attached to the Fae, I think, is able to convey sort of the unknown, the inability to grasp just what the nature of those kinds of creatures and that kind of darkness that they can take up. So the fact that you're sitting in the middle of, some very strange experiments and things like that, you're getting a different kind of unexplainable uh, that maintains a level of, I suppose, curiosity about just what the Fae are in the world and just what mage and magics are and sorcerers are. So it helps keep you hooked, and it's not exploitative so much as demonstrative of that existence.
Yes, that's a good point. I mean, the Fae in this show and in some of the older folk tales are very alien, and like you said, trying to figure out what's going on is almost part of it.
So getting into beyond our first, general impressions and everything, I'm kind of curious. Episode 1, I want to go ahead and talk about this in a little more detail because episode 1, in my opinion, is one of the best opening episodes of the last few years. mostly because it introduces so many of the elements that make this series good within those first 25 minutes. I mean, for instance, going through my notes, I like first off that the series is quotable. Elias, after he buys Chise at the auction, tells her, "Carry yourself like someone who is worth looking at." And that is really something that struck hard with me when we were rewatching it. And then I also love how they weren't afraid to change the animation style and show us Chibi Elias before the end of the first episode as well. So that's another point that came up that would come up repeatedly throughout this first 12 episodes. But little things like that just set this up as a really good first episode. I love the animation, I love the background music. I just thought that the whole package of this first episode was really compelling, even though I've seen this series 2 or 3 times already. Um, just that first episode reminded me of how much I love this show, and I'm kind of curious, Bama, what were your impressions from that first episode and the various elements that I brought up, or anything else that you noticed that I didn't mention?
The music was unbelievable. I absolutely love the theme song. The background music, like you said, background music falls into three categories. It's either you, you notice it because it's not very good, you don't notice it because it's so seamless, it's very much integrated and it's part of the experience, or frankly, John Williams wrote the score. You've got those three options. John Williams did not write this score, but it was very seamless and very lyrical. And when I say lyrical, I mean the music and the animation combining really made it, like I said, it was just the seamless, beautiful concepts. And I love the fact that it was in England. And I love the fact that Chisei was like, "We're in England?" Just just the look on her face when she said it. It's like, okay. She's just gonna accept whatever comes her way from here on out. Okay, Chisei, go for it.
Well, to be fair, after someone pays £5 million for you at an auction, and you suddenly see that they have a giant skull for a head, at that point you're pretty much locked into, okay, sure, why not?
Yeah, but that should have been the first clue. If you're purchased for £5 million, well, that's English currency. So there you go.
I guess that's why I was so surprised that she was so surprised. But then maybe she doesn't know much about um English pounds. I mean, I think I knew what pounds were when I was 15, but I would have had to sit and think for a few minutes if you asked me what's the currency of most countries. I would just have to sit there and go, "Okay, wait a minute. I know this, I know this, I know this." And it wouldn't be an instant recollection. So, maybe that's what was going on.
A pint's a pound the world around, and the English go to the pub for a pint. So it all makes sense.
So, getting into the meat of the series, the first couple of episodes are spent introducing the side characters. Bama, we'll start with you. Were there any side characters that were introduced within these first 2 or 3 episodes before we started getting into the kitty murder scenes? Were there any side characters or supporting characters that kind of struck you as interesting and you wanted to learn more about them?
Um, Silver grew on me throughout the series, but the first side character that I really just said, "This, I want to see a whole bunch more of this character was Elias's friend in what was it supposed to be London where they were?
Yeah, I believe you. Are you talking about
Angelica,
Angelica?
the
That
alchemist.
sounds right.
Okay.
Just absolutely not going to take any kind of crap. She's going to call Elias out. Because you see this very large skull-headed creature, and he is absolutely cowing down before this finger-wagging human, and I'm like, okay, tell me more. I am here. I have my popcorn. And I had a thing for the pixies too. I mean, who doesn't love a good pixie?
Absolutely.
they they knew what was best for Chisei, which is to become lost in the Feywild.
Yep, you go back far enough to some of the older fairy tales, and that's pretty much exactly what you're going to get. Don't follow a fairy out into the forest. I think I was yelling that at the screen, much to the amusement of
Yeah,
LB
yeah.
and Andy.
So getting into the middle of the series, we're getting into, the first real dramatic story arc, which is not really, we're kind of glazing over the dragon story, even though the dragon story in episode 3 was really good.
That was
And
beautiful.
I particularly loved the insert song when she says seeing the sky from the dragon's point of view. I absolutely adored that scene. I thought it was absolutely amazing. And again, it was just one of those things that just kind of blew me away all over again.
Yeah, Wit does a good job in general with the series. Uh, it's very pretty in a lot of places, especially sort of background and scene setting. But I feel like that whole ending was one of those things that just gets to push you over into sort of they know how to be kind of breathtaking with this kind of stuff as well. So
When he said his last few moments were spent in flight, I was just, oh my gosh, it was so beautiful. I love that outlook on death.
So with the first real dramatic story arc of the series with the kiddies, I actually took a note on episode 4. My very first note was remembering, oh crap, this is the first story arc, and my note, it literally says, uh-oh, let's see if Bama can handle this episode. So
with
yeah,
aplomb.
yeah, so that first, story arc was really kind of the testing grounds that I think that I was looking for with this series to see, how Bama would handle it. And I was actually really pleasantly surprised that she didn't, look at me and with disgust and hate in her eyes that I was making her watch this.
Oh, were
Were
you
you
still
still
there when we
watching
get to
together
see
at
that?
that point then?
Yeah, I was there through the first 8 episodes.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, we got through the first 8 episodes while I was there.
That in and of itself is a huge testament. I don't usually watch more than really, I don't usually watch more than 3 or 4 episodes at a jump. I'm not a big fan
Wasn't this
of
over the course of a
marathoning.
couple days?
Hmm?
Wasn't this over the course of a couple days, or
Yeah, it was over the course of like 2 or 3 days.
Oh, okay. I remember the first time we turned it on, we watched a ton of them, and I remember being very surprised that I wasn't getting what I call watched out. Um, but
Mhm.
yeah, you probably got to see me squirm a little and
eh,
ask Andy to tell me when it's over.
Yep, I was sitting there at my laptop taking little notes and keeping an eye on how you were reacting.
Aw, thank you. Yeah, it was like I said, I mean it's a little intense, but by then I had already watched what 4 episodes, so I knew that the series I felt like the series was like, okay, we're actually there's going to be some dark moments, but this is ultimately something that's full of light and hope. And I'm like, okay, I'm willing to sit through something really unpleasant to see where it goes, to see where, how we're going to get some hope out of this. And when she was trying to bring the two spirits together and clean the land of corruption, I mean, there was purpose to it. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense.
You need the darkness to match the light against. So therefore,
Yeah.
So, alright. So I mean, yeah, there was a little things in these episodes that kind of, I remember watching and taking notes. I forgot how often Chisei falls into the water in this series.
Oh
the
yeah.
story of Bone Daddy and the girl with a propensity for drowning.
I tell
Yeah,
you
it
what,
seems
she
like
must love
every
swimming.
I don't know, because it seems like every couple of episodes she falls into the water and she just lets herself sink until someone rescues her.
I like how it gets lampshaded at one point as well. I think the third major time back in the Dragons, you're like, what, again?
Yeah.
And she falls into the water, and it's like, oh.
In her defense, she is pretty skinny and fat's what floats. So maybe that's what's going on. She's just naturally non-buoyant.
So speaking of things that are buoyant, let's talk about the introduction of the Fairy Queen. I
She
Oh,
say
really
that,
brings the tight to Titania.
yes, she really, really does.
yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, Bama, with your experience with fairies and fantasy and that kind of thing. What did you think of the series presentation of Titania and Oberon?
Oh my goodness. I've seen so many different interpretations of Titania. And they all amuse me generally for different reasons. This was one of the weirdest interpretations of Oberon I've ever seen. I I really kind of didn't see that one coming. I'm trying. I'm Give me a couple seconds to gather my thoughts, and I'll get back to you on
Yeah,
Titania. I vaguely
yeah,
remember
no problem.
saying, "What is she wearing?" But
Yeah, so with the Fairy
yeah.
Queen, and the with that, um, the thing that struck me as the most bizarre about Titania was her character design more than her presentation. I thought her design was very bizarre in that, and I'm trying not to be crude when I say this, but her breasts looked like they were water balloons.
They really
Sure.
did.
Yeah, they looked like they were just water balloons that were barely being held up.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that kind of caught me off guard the most about the presentation there.
To be fair, if you're going to have a completely unrealistic, physics defying, uh, as we've seen in other works before, if you stick it on the fairy queen of the Fae, it's like, okay, well, it doesn't have to make any sense. You're not really bothered by that. Apparently it's a pool of water, kind of, sort of. I don't know. I mean,
I wanted to love her, but she is impossible to cosplay because that defies all logic.
yeah. Now I'm very curious. But yeah, I mean, her face and hair and the vine wrapping of it. There's a lot of appeal to her overall character design, but it is kind of an odd choice there. I'm very curious how it comes across in the manga, because there's one thing for it to just be sort of a sultry arara lady stereotype, and they're just kind of presented there in a who cares fashion because she's the queen of the fairies. She doesn't need your opinion on anything going on. But the way that the anime plays with it is like, who decided to animate this way? I feel like you couldn't pull that off in the manga.
No, I doubt that it has nearly the same impact in the manga as it does in the anime.
You could, however, make Oberon still a wily masochist who likes getting chomped on by puppies when he misbehaves. So
Yeah, I felt like they wanted to make Oberon into Puck for some reason. And
that makes a reasonable amount of sense.
I pulled up what I did was right now I've pulled up a picture of Titania, and I remember now both why I didn't make any notes or have any real impressions, because I found her to be inherently distracting. And I mean, I know that sounds very um almost chauvinistic, but speaking as a woman who's had a breast reduction, I promise I remember what that felt like, and it was not comfortable. And I was just looking at her going, "Oh my god, honey, your shoulders, your shoulders."
Yes, but
I,
imagine.
I oh my gosh. And I like I said, I promise that is just not a comfortable thing. I
I
just felt
do.
for her more than anything else.
I do enjoy the interplay between them. A lot of times you get the king and the queen of the fairies. You have to get some kind of stately, almost Tolkien-esque presentation of some kind of elfin king, and in this case, they're wise but weird. They're kind of mischievous and playful. They feel like a more authentic, whatever that means, version of the Fae that like to mess around with most people, whether they're under their charge or just those they're interacting with. Chi and Oberon get to chat about how many kids they're going to have in the future. So they make the both of them, Chisa and Elias, blush.
Yeah.
So, of course, the one I felt for the most in that scene was poor Spriggan. He got to make many long-suffering sighs.
So, once we get past the introduction of Titania and Oberon, I think episodes 7, 8, and 9 are my favorite episodes of this half of the series. A, because we get the dog story arc, which I love dogs, and I love it when they're featured prominently within a story. So I loved that whole story arc. So let's talk about that first before we get into my other point that I was about to make. This doggy story arc with Ruth and Isabel and him chasing after her coffin and waiting for her at her grave to wake up. Uh, can you think of a more touching story from the last little while, really? Because this story to me is really one of the best examples of what this series is capable of, and I'm curious to hear what everybody else thinks as well. Bama, let's go ahead. Let's start with you. Uh, After the darkness of the Kitty story, and with the the going into Ruth's story arc with the dog, what were you thinking at this point? Did you enjoy this story a little bit more, a little bit less? Did you have any strong opinions?
I remember right after it was one of those memories that came back very slowly as it unfolded. But then, of course, the church dog and the black dog, and they're in England. Duh. And it all just it fell together and made sense. That's a rather obscure legend that a black
Uh
dog will
huh.
haunt the churches, and I'd forgotten about it until watching this. So I really loved it on that level. And I thought that the rest of it was really sweet too. I'm still not entirely certain if the dog currently known as Ruth whatever was fully human and loved his sister, or if he actually was a literal dog the entire time. And at the end of it, it doesn't really matter. And I really liked that aspect as well.
Yeah, I mean, I always interpreted it as he was a dog the entire time up until Isabel died, at which point the he basically waited so long that his soul kind of evolved and he was able to take on different forms. That's the way that I always interpreted it. CT, did you have any thoughts or an alternate interpretation?
I think one of the I think it's fairly explicit in the end from the will-o-wisp was getting Ulysses, Ulyss, to realize that he's forgotten what he is. It definitely was a dog and became this entity in the end, and now exists as kind of a spirit by form of it. But especially in the way that the memories were presented, at no point are we shown that may have been an actual human with a sister. It's just this was the melding of it. I feel like they were definitely also leaning into the story of Hachiko,
Uh-huh.
that most well-known Akita who remembered his master, who didn't come home from work one day and continued to go to the train station for like a decade, waiting for a master to come home. So it seemed to be a fairly conscious merging of that kind of cultural pull from the Japanese side, and then
Uh-huh.
the English myth to combine into a more meaningful thing. It's not just a particular dog that became a spirit, and in this case, Ruth had a connection to someone who, resembled, not just resembled Chisei in being red haired and green eyed, but in this case, also with the understanding in the background she died too early, and that's what we already know will happen to Chisei unless Elias can prevent it. So they get to it gets to be a well handled and meaningful pact that they form as a result of all of this. So I think it goes through well. I think it stands astride the utter lunatic fringe that is Cartophilus, and especially the chimera he has constructed, which includes Isabel's head. And whew, bad stuff there. And you get one of the I think most picturesque scenes of the series there when their pact is formed, and you
Uh
get to see
Yes.
Chise and Ruth next to each other. I'm like, yeah, that's the way it's done.
huh. So the other point that I wanted to mention, the other part of this three-part arc that I really, really liked was the story of Joel the gardener and his. I can never pronounce it correctly. Let me look at it. Leon Sid or something like that.
Oh, the
Lian Shi.
Leinan Shi, something like
Yeah,
that.
I can never pronounce that correctly. Thank you. That is one of my favorite ongoing stories of the entire series, and I'll tell Bama right now that if you are ever curious and you want to see how this series ends, how this particular story arc ends, it is absolutely worth going into the second half of this series just to see the conclusion of it.
Okay, you can't see me right now, but I have very wide eyes and an open mouth. You may have just talked me into watching the second half of this series because I absolutely loved that.
Yeah, that a story arc gets concluded in the second half. It's really well done. I really enjoy it a lot. Like I said, it's my favorite ongoing story of the entire series. I really wish that they had kind of rushed it a little bit more so that you could have seen the second part of that story. But definitely, if you liked the first part of it, the second half is going to have you bawling.
Yeah, I didn't know there was a second half. I just thought that it was going to, continue on indefinitely with her just quietly loving him and him just quietly loving her back. It's just so sweet.
Yeah, definitely it is. Even if all you do is watch the episode that concludes that second half, it's absolutely worth seeking out.
Thank you. I may do that.
So yeah, but episode 9 is even more than just that. The other reason why I really enjoy this episode is because of Silver just showing some more character in this episode, which I love. I
Mm.
loved how in the beginning of it she literally hands Chise a wallet full of money and pushes them out the door.
Something different. I assume you guys were watching the dub.
Yeah.
Do they always call her Silver?
They eventually call her Silky as well.
I've always
Nice.
found it interesting because in the Japanese she's almost always called Silky, except by Elias, who calls her Silver periodically.
Yeah.
And I feel like there is still mystery within it that will come out at some point. Why does he refer to her differently than the others in particular? I'm like, okay, this means something, and of course you don't really get to there in this case. Uh, I wouldn't really think to call her Silver because Ruth isn't and Chise isn't specifically. So
Uh huh.
I was curious if they reverse that or just went with Silver the whole time in the dub.
They do refer to her as Silver most of the time, but every so often she gets called Silky. Which actually confused me the very first time I watched this series because I was trying to figure out what her name actually was. But if I had to choose an absolute favorite moment from this episode, the moment that not only made me laugh the hardest, but also made me love Silver as much as I did, it's the moment when Chisei gets pulled into Elias's bedroom and the door closes, and you
I wanted,
see Silver just outside the door with the hammer going against her hand as though she's ready to break some kneecaps.
I wanted to make a GIF of that and post it in the channel. After watching that, I'm like, I gotta clip that.
I think I do have that as a GIF, actually. I'd have to go searching for it, though.
Probably somewhere.
But yeah, that is probably my favorite moment of the first half. If I had to choose a singular moment as my favorite of these first 12 episodes, it's just Silver standing there ready to bust some heads if she needs to.
There are just too many awesome moments, which in many ways, a lot of the times, it's like just Chisei being contemplative in a scene or something where you're seeing her face and eyes framed against the bath and other stuff. But the ones that really stick out are the dragon flight scene and when she and Ruth bond, and the whole damn ending when she phoenixes up, which is tremendous.
Oh yeah,
So
we were definitely going to be
there's
getting to
there's so
that.
many single moments that what is it when she has effectively saved Mina and Matthew, and everything is transforming into a glowing blue flowerscape. There's just so much powerful imagery there that yes, while I like some of the humor scenes, certainly if you're gonna do anything from the beginning stuff, it's going to be one of those really leaned on powerfully vivid scenes.
So, getting into the last few episodes of this half, this is when things get dark in a different way, and we learn about some of the history of Elias. And I'm kind of curious, Bama, what you thought about these episodes. Had you pieced anything together up to this point, or was this all just, completely unexpected? Learning about his past and his history and the way that he just kind of showed up in the forest without any clue of who he was or where he came from.
I was surprised that he was as young as he is, if that makes any sense.
Uh-huh.
But I wasn't surprised that he didn't know who he was. He doesn't seem overly sure of himself overall. So honestly, it wasn't anything that really surprised me, but it wasn't anything that I was expecting either. I was like, okay, that explains some stuff more than, any shocking revelation. But that didn't bother me. And I really loved when he complained about Elias's inability to ski. That just, I felt that on a primal level. I'm the only one in
you
my
saw
family that doesn't ski.
you saw him pratfall once in the scene as well. It was great.
They've tried to teach me for 10 years, dude. I am the one person in my family that can't
That's fine.
ski.
You can go tobogganing.
Maybe I'll take up snowshoeing or something.
I was at least a little surprised by this because from everything that we've seen so far, the background story of Elias to me came across as something from either the all Fey side or the all physical side that was seeking something and trying to become something else and getting trapped in the middle, uh, because the bestiality and other stuff, the darkness, things that were hinted at, seem to be hinting at a past wherein this is sort of a pseudo curse that is deserved for some reason of dark magic origin, as opposed to is just a weird kind of chimera sort of critter that came out of nowhere and didn't really notice anything. Is just kind of like a part of nature that popped out and then started hanging out with Lyndall. So
Well,
that that definitely was different than I thought. I knew they shared an old history, but I assumed it was they've known each other for centuries because they've both been around, for at least that long or longer and ran across each other, not like they became instant pals from the moment of Elias's awakening, as it were. So, so that didn't seem to me to be what the story was trying to tell. So I'm still I'm still not sure how it gels with some of the other comments that were made. Uh, it was very cute, especially because he goes all chibi form, and
It should
especially
be
because
Elias's best Elias.
it is definitely best. And we definitely very quickly get introduced to Best Girl Rahab. So therefore,
Well, to me, that was actually part of it. Elias's middling not really being in one world or the other. That's some of the oldest fairy lore, is that they occupy the places in the middle: dawn, dusk, the edge of the forest, the edge of the water, where things are transitioning from one state to the next. That's where the fairies are. That's where their place is. So it makes perfect sense to me that Elias would be in this weird middling state, not sure exactly which way he is. That's just really old lore for me. I picked that up, filed it away, and said next.
so based on these first 12 episodes, I'm kind of curious, Bamo, what impressions did you take away from this? Was this something that you said in the very beginning that you enjoyed it, and you were consider before we recorded, you mentioned that you were considering watching the second half of it. Did anything that we said here on this podcast tonight kind of nudge you closer towards wanting to see more of it? Or because you also mentioned that you were satisfied with the way the first half ended and you wanted to be able to you vaguely hinted that you wanted to be able to remember the series while you were still enjoying it. And I'm kind of curious, do you still feel that way? Do you think that you might finish it off someday?
I think I might actually. Hang on. Sorry. I think I might actually. I really did enjoy it a lot. Um, y'all have mentioned that it gets darker toward the end, and I'm a little worried about it ending very cliffhangery. That's not something I really want to be interested in. Like I said, I didn't mind the bloody cat murder. Okay, I minded it, but I could get through it because I believe that there was some light on the other side. And if this series is one of those that kind of descends into darkness slowly, then I'm not so sure. But from what y'all are telling me, that's not going to be the case. So I am definitely tempted, and I enjoyed it so much. The animation's gorgeous, the music's beautiful.
Certainly
The
not
little
fully.
succubus is in love with the gardener guy.
But the manga is still not finished, so that's part of it. There's no way to know how the story will actually end. Uh,
Right.
and then even if the manga finishes, you have to be willing to potentially finish something because the anime may never get a season 2 even after the manga finishes because you never really know if they're going to go through and do it. One would assume probably, but you can't take it for granted in anime land.
To
So
be fair, the thing is with Ancient Magus Bride is that it was, oh god, let me look real fast. I'm really curious. The first, yeah, the manga didn't start running until 2013. So that was a good 4 years that they waited to turn this into an anime. And I'm really curious to know how long they're going to wait to make us see a second season because they're releasing little OVAs right now, but a full second season has yet to be announced, and I'm really curious to know when it's going to happen. I feel very confident that it's going to happen. I feel very confident that we are going to get a second season. It's just a matter of when.
I certainly hope so. I don't recall how the sales were. I wouldn't put too much behind the length of time before it was picked up because if they committed to 2 core, it's a monthly manga, so it takes a long
Uh
time to
huh.
build up that much material to run with. So it might have been a foregone conclusion. In some ways, I'm very surprised they did 2 core out of it. Not because they didn't have enough story, but simply because where episode 12 ends is one of those so utterly strong ending points that I'm like, well, of course you'd just go up to there and then see how it does and come back later. Why? I mean, it's hard to see. There are certain series where the midpoint ends in a way that is extremely strong compared to where they'll end because they threw 2 core at the story and didn't have the same power level to end that. And I feel like this is one of those that exemplifies that most because episode 12, the ending of it feels ultimately like it. They're playing the OP in the final scenes. I mean, every single hallmark of final episode is being trotted out while they're doing this very powerfully, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, there'll be an episode next week." Or not next. It wasn't next week. It took 2 weeks. They had New Year's off, but but it very much surprised me uh, in the final form of it. Uh, and yeah, certainly I hope that they will get more, but I think it's the kind of thing where they're probably waiting for the author to either wrap things up or get to the point saying, okay, I have one more arc in me that I'm doing, and then I'm going to do other stuff, and then they're like, okay, now we can get to storyboarding and checking with the production committees again, and bringing bring in all of the you know people in tow for completing everything. Uh, but if the manga is going to go on for 10 more years, are they just going to do a season 2 at some point to do some more of the story and still have no ending commit to it? So
Well, I mean, we waited 6 years for Chihaya Furu season 3, so
that we did, and I do say if Chihaya Furu happened, season 3 happened, anything can. But how long have we been waiting for more Yona of the Dawn or some other things that are that I feel are similarly situated to something like Ancient Magus Bride? So fingers crossed.
indeed.
Now, we didn't actually talk about those final episodes. You kind of skipped forward into, are you going to watch more? And I'm like, maybe we could talk about them too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We can totally go back and go back. I didn't mean to gloss over them as much as I did.
It
I
sounded
think
like you were trying to move to a let's wrap things up. But that's fine.
I
I'm
think
still awake.
CT
We can do this.
I think CT was accurate when he said we absolutely have to talk about when she phoenixes up. That was
Lord.
so unbelievably beautiful. It was
I
just
remember when I wrote a review of the first half of this series, I reviewed the first DVD box set. Um, and I remember I included a line about that in my review, and my editor sent back a note saying, no, 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 that is way too big of a spoiler. You cannot say that. It's
aw.
like, but it's in the opening credits.
It really
Yeah.
is.
But yeah, that whole story of Elias's history and then Chise deciding, you know what, it's time for me to go back home, and she phoenixes and flies across the sky with the help of the fairies and lands in his arms, and just, oh my goodness, that scene is so gorgeous. Oh, I could go
know.
on about it.
Well, you got some time if you want to wax poetic. But all three episodes, it's interesting. It feels very slice of lifey because there's only simple things going on. She goes back to the land of the dragons and plays around with some of them, but she's meeting I forget the old dragon's name.
Niven?
Nevin. Yeah. Uh to there's a lot of playfulness to it while she's also learning Elias's backstory. But she's also coming to terms with things about her own relationship that's going on. She's describing a lot of things as being too selfish and guarded, even while she's willing to effectively be bonded and sold to someone that simply because he placed any value on her life at all. So you get a bit of psychoanalysis of her going on while the wand scenes are happening. She does a whole lot of whittling. Man, started real damn thick branches there that she's turning into a mini cane. And yeah, I mean her decision to leave and the manner of going home is an amazing capstone on it. But even before that, when you get Lindell Echoes' song, which is a great song as well. I very much.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's a very bardic feel to it all there, and then you've been getting a few shots of Elias at home and determining the ways in which he misses her presence, and then the two of them chatting through the Star Lake field, like all of these nice touches there, and then getting her wand fully constructed, and it's like, well, we can fly home, but maybe I can fly home all on my own. You just use magic, right? You can do anything. We're linked, so therefore. And yes, the other part that I especially like is it does the good part, like the extremely strong part of the OP. I love the OP in general, but the
Excuse me.
the very specific way it starts with the harsh dash dash dori dash dash. that
Yeah.
particular phrasing, it kind of takes me out of getting into the song and then enjoyably getting out of the song. But everything past like the first 5 seconds and the last 10 seconds is just great. And of course, that's what gets summoned for her whole flying scene. And she's freaking going into orbit and being all phoenixy. They'd be like, by the way, I have unlimited magic power. Let me use some of that. And then you even get a little mini epilogue as well. And I think for the first time, you start to see that there has to be something more behind. I mean, her memories of her family, specifically her mother, have all been extraordinarily dark for good reason, but that's been her mental mind frame since the beginning of the show. So there you go. Thanks. So right at the end, her arc in this case is, I think, coming around to some of what you said in the beginning, where Elias says that she should hold herself as if she values herself, and that's one of the things that she hasn't been. So we've seen that slowly opening, and this episode 12 is where she gets to come to terms with it, and she finally has a good dream, remembering her parents fondly, and then more specifically, some kind of memory reveal that she has or had a sister, and then you're busy going, what actually happened that tore the family apart and put Chisei in the condition that she starts the series from. And so there's both pleasantry and progress, and also kind of more mystery and darkness on the way as to what happened at that point. So
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely a great way to end the first core. I forget ultimately how much of that gets paid off in the second. It's been a while, so it's been almost precisely 3.5 years.
So you haven't rewatched it very much over the last couple of years?
Nope. I've mentioned it before that the way that I rewatch
Yeah,
is by
yeah.
introducing people normally, or in this case for the podcast. In this case, I watched it with someone who I would have normally introduced it to. So in this case, I didn't go back to it and re-experience. I do try to push this one on folk as well, though, because it's especially for any kind of fantasy lover in general.
So, did anybody have any final thoughts, any comments, anything that we glossed over that you want to hit on before we talk about what our next series is going to be?
Just that I'm going to be thinking about it, and I'll let y'all know when I decide if I'm going to watch the rest of it.
Okay, sounds good.
We definitely need an Angelica spin-off series. And I need a Rahab backstory. And I don't know, let's give Simon something. He's neat. I think that I think that was one of, in fact, thinking about Simon in general, going back to the introduction of Titania, that was one of my favorite things, was her whole God obsessed with sin diss for the Christian deity upon which he worships, and then her just going like, get out of here, and porting Simon to wander lost by the edge of the forest until they came back. Like, okay.
So, all right, before we wrap things up, I want to talk a little bit about what our next series is going to be, because initially, CT and I had a couple of ideas in mind, and we presented these ideas to Bama, who decided to jump forward a little bit in her training, all on her own, and we're very proud of her. She decided that she would like to watch the series Mushishi as our next series, and I'm kind of curious. Bama, I know that you have kind of an affinity towards folklore and spiritual creatures and everything. Was that kind of the main draw for you to pick this one, or did you have something else that kind of drew you towards this one to make it your choice?
The folklore was the big draw, and the episodic nature was the other big draw. I really like, um, short stories, basically. And I
Mm-hmm.
figured this is going to be a series of short little tales about a guy who's wandering Japan and protecting villages from the resident yokai, and I am here for this. I want to see this, and
How
I'm
did
really
Yeah,
you
appreciative.
how did you come across it then? Was it something that
Uh,
Andy or someone knew and suggested to you, or were you looking
no,
around and
it
stuff?
showed up in my Google suggested for you feed. It shows me a lot of articles from various and sundry, and this one happened to be a list of healing anime, and Mushishi was mentioned. And then a few days later, it was a list of underrated anime, and Mushishi was there as well. And I was like, okay, I'm seeing this all over the place. I know that I'm supposed to be the otaku in training here, but maybe I can move from apprentice to journeyman and surprise CT and LB and say, hey, can I pick one?
yeah. Well, I mean, like we've mentioned before on previous podcasts, this is kind of what we were building towards. Was we were eventually going to have you set off and choose your own series, and so you're kind of jumping ahead of us, but we're on board. So
You are
Is this a
kicking
ser?
at least one of the wheels to the curb.
Oh no! One of the training wheels.
Yes,
Have either
exactly.
of y'all seen this show?
CT, I believe, has seen it. I watched a few episodes of it a very long time ago. I have not watched all of it, though, so it will be kind of new to me as well.
I
Okay.
absorbed it in a odd fashion because I watched it when it came back, which was another one of those surprising that it ever got a second season of it in 2014. So it attracted a lot of attention. And I think I watched some of Next Passage before realizing that it had a first series, and then I went back to watch the first series, and then went forward again to the next series, and it kind of doesn't matter. You could almost take the whole damn thing in a random scattershot order, so it definitely fills what you're saying of telling short stories by and large. There are a few connected episodes, but nothing that matters too much. The continuity is extremely light, so I picked it up in kind of a haphazard fashion.
Okay. Well, I certainly hope that both of y'all like it, and I didn't pick one that y'all are going to be going, "Oh my gosh," the entire time through. But
Uh,
I got my
I
fingers
like it.
Well,
crossed.
I mean,
I,
it's certainly no Fooly Cooley, so
what could be? What could be? So, nah, that's good stuff. And everyone's gonna kink on Gingo. He rules. So,
so, all right, on that note, let's go ahead, let's wrap things up. Thank you, CT and Bama, for joining me for another fun discussion.
Thanks for
It's a
having
pleasure
me.
as always.
And thank you to all of you for listening to us ramble on for the last hour. If you'd like to give us a little like, share, or subscribe, that would be most beneficial to us, and we would appreciate it greatly. It's worth noting that the next couple of months is going to be the holiday season, so recording schedules might get a little funky, but we will do our best to make sure that this stays as monthly as possible.
Mhm.
But
Mm.
we shall see what happens with that, because real life takes precedence.
Unfortunately.
So, all right, and on that note, thank you very much again to everybody, and have a great night.
Good night, folks.
Thanks, you too. Bye, everybody.